So, your body keeps score. If you're eating a bunch of poor foods, and a lot of people don't realize those poor foods, your body will leach out and buffer the nutrients it needs to digest that food from your bones.
Your bones respond to the forces placed upon it. And so, for the person who hasn't done anything, and I've seen so many people, that's why I always say that a diagnosis of osteoporosis for many people is a blessing in disguise because they sort of are forced to exercise and do all these great things that end up completely changing their lives.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends.
Hello, welcome back to the Brain Fitness Podcast. Today I have a very special guest, someone who really specializes in happiness, but she calls it Happy Bones, Happy Life Podcast. And she's out there sharing with the world that there's some joy to be had and we can age gracefully and we can be healthy, whether you use medication or not. We kind of talked a little bit about that before that. What we're talking about is just getting your life in balance, really. So Margie Bissinger, welcome to the show. And it's great to have you here.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit of it. You've been doing this happiness journey for 40 years. So tell me about some of the powerful things you've seen along the way. What got you to switch? I mean, a lot of people, obviously, when they're working with, osteoporosis and things like that, that's not always that happy, right? So how did you make the switch to get people to think differently about those kind of conditions?
It actually started before I even got involved with osteoporosis. So as a physical therapist, my area of expertise is musculoskeletal, so orthopedic physical therapy. And so I was working with chronic pain at the time in an outpatient clinic, and my patients were truly miserable, like everybody, their back, their neck, TMJ. And I had just gone through a very bad situation in my life. And people were saying to me, Margie, you're so happy. What's your secret? And I thought if they only had known what I'd gone through, they really wouldn't be saying that. But then at that moment, it hit me, you know what? Despite my circumstances, I actually was happy. And the happiness was an inside job, not dependent on my circumstances. And so I said, you know what? What the heck? I'm going to start teaching them. And this is over 40 years ago. I'm going to start teaching them what helped me, like what got me through a tough situation. And miracles started happening. Chronic pain got better so much faster. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then you started seeing a spark return to their eyes and they began enjoying life. And I just saw how powerful it was. Like this was, happiness was true medicine. And so since that time, I've incorporated in every single thing I do. And I also just teach a happiness program, but I really feel it's the root of health. And it's not the Pollyanna happiness walking around with a fake smile. There's many facets to it. But I found, so that's how I got started. I ended up in osteoporosis from a totally different way. But I've been doing the happiness way before, just as a physical therapist. And it's been so powerful. I see it more and more, even how this is the foundation. And once people get that foundation, everything just piles upon and gets better and better.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are concerned about their bone health, obviously, as the population grows and things like that. But why should anyone at any age be concerned about their bone health? What would you say to that?
What's interesting is that people think it's an older person's disease or condition, and they don't really have to worry about it until they're older. Well, the truth is it's never too early and it's never too late because we develop the majority of our bone, our peak bone, the majority, 85 to 90% of our bone in women is by the age of 18 and 20 by the age of men. By the age of 30, we have our peak bone, the most bone we're going to accumulate. So what we do when we're younger or our children completely matters. It's sort of like a bank. You put deposits in, and then if you need to take some out later, you're good. So if we've put the right deposits in, if we do lose some bone, which does happen with aging, with different things, then we're set. So what we do younger makes all the difference in the world. And the problem, so for the young people, it absolutely matters. And at all ages, we can still do things to keep our bones strong and healthy. And it's never too late because at any age they found out you can still build bone, which people didn't realize. So truly, what you do when you're younger is going to matter. And it's a very bad epidemic in the United States. 1 in 2, 50% of women, and 1 in 4, 25% of men will have a fracture due to osteoporosis in their lifetime. It's in the world, it's a little less, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men, but still, that's terrible. No one wants to be one of those statistics. So it really does matter. And who doesn't want to enjoy their life, be active when they're older, and be able to travel and do and be with their family? So it matters at all ages. And I think, unfortunately, our society is so sedentary and aren't doing the things that really do stimulate bones. So I worry a little bit because, what people do when they're younger is going to have a major effect when they're older.
Yeah, I know that America's not the only country that thinks, you could take the pill and solve all the problems, but I always say you can't have the pill without the skill. I mean, if you need the pill, you need to get going with some skills. So what do you think is the most important thing that everyone can do in their lives today to promote strong bones or healthy bones? Because this is important actually for every phase of health, and especially, our bones carry us around so we can see the world and experience it and express, and really, which we're going to get to a little bit here, is happiness. If we're hurting, or if we're afraid, or we're stressed out about our health. So tell us a little bit about why is this important? Why is this such a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that there's so much that can be done. To me, that's what's so empowering, and that's what's really so fabulous. And it's really a combination. I can't say there's one thing, but the bones are not in isolation. A lot of times in modern medicine, people look at the body in terms of isolation. Oh, you have a problem with your gut, or you have a problem with this. But the bones, usually when there's something going on with the bones, there's something other places in the body as well. So I think it's very important, as you made a very good point, where we want to take like a pill for every ill, and all right, you know what, I'm losing bone, I'm just going to take medicine. But you're missing the boat, because you can't just do that. You have to figure out all the different factors. So I always think it's important to figure out the root cause. Or do you have an inflammatory condition? Are you not absorbing your nutrients? What could be the root cause? But every person can do exercise. And that's so exciting that they've really shown that exercise can increase bone density, prevent falls. It can make such a big difference. And every single person, different people can do different levels, but everybody can up their exercise. So I think, exercise is paramount and something that everybody can do. And we can go into that in more detail. But nutrition, making sure you're getting the right nutrients for your bone, what you eat really matters, and what you digest. If you have an issue with digestion, that's going to matter. So you need to digest. And then what I know what you promote is, people don't realize the importance of reducing stress, because stress can have major negative effects on your bones and overall health as well. So it's sort of a combination of root causes, exercise, the nutrition, and then, your lifestyle to reduce stress. And also I like to increase happiness. So I find when people do all those pieces, that's what really works. And they can do that through their whole life. And not only will their bones be better, but their overall health and, energy, just every aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, the people on the Brain Fitness podcast have heard me say before, number one for brain health is nutrition, because you can't outthink a bad diet. So, your body keeps score. If you're eating a bunch of poor foods, and a lot of people don't realize those poor foods, your body will leach out and buffer the nutrients it needs to digest that food from your bones. That's a lot of ways we're missing it, like sugars and things like this. The bones have to, get the potassium and things out of the bones to break that down and metabolize it. Also, they don't realize the benefits. Number 2 for us is exercise. We've got to have some kind of load-bearing exercise, and that's what's going to build that muscle. The bone density. That's why there's actually companies out there like OsteoStrong that actually, it's a real quick workout you do, but it's all about resistance training to get the bones stronger. And a lot of people think, oh, I got weak bones, I can't do that kind of exercise. What would you say to somebody who's thinking that? I mean, obviously they need to get help if they can't walk or they can't do it. But what would you recommend somebody do, and what type of exercise you think would be good? Like, let's say somebody who is maybe a little bit compromised right now, to somebody who's physically fit but needs to start. There's never like I think you said, there's never a time that's too early to start building that muscle. If you're talking about like a bank account, I mean, you want to, just like retirement, the more money you have when you retire, the better it's going to be as you live longer. So that's the same thing with bone health.
In terms of the good thing is that your bones respond to the forces placed upon it. And so for the person who hasn't done anything, and I've seen so many people, that's why I always say that a diagnosis of osteoporosis for many people is a blessing in disguise, because they sort of are forced to exercise and do all these great things that end up completely changing their lives for the better. So they look back and they're like, they went from a couch potato to someone who's super active, and strength training is empowering. It's amazing. But it's very interesting because, so the person that's done nothing, even lifting their arm against gravity, so the force is going to be very different. What's going to stimulate, it has to be more than you're accustomed to get any benefits in bone density. So the person that hasn't done anything, 2 pounds, maybe a lot. Obviously you have to keep increasing that, but what the research has found, there was a study done in Australia called the Lift More trial. And what they did, they took people who had osteoporosis. I mean, people had low bone density, and it was done under supervision, which I think is very important, because a lot of people think, let me see those exercises and I'll do them myself. But people can get hurt. And so I always recommend, when you ask what was the first thing, that someone sees a physical therapist. And usually that's covered by insurance. And a lot of people just don't know. So if you go to a physical therapist who has a background in osteoporosis, which you can easily find, they can help you make sure you're doing things safely, start you at the right level. But in terms of this Live More trial, it was so exciting because they found that the people and it was intense. I mean, this is way more intense, where people were doing squats with weights. They were doing overhead presses, things that usually you wouldn't think someone who has low bone mass and osteoporosis should do. But it was just the opposite. These people gained bone density, significant bone density. And they even found, when they looked at it, I interviewed the woman who was in charge of this study, Belinda Beck, on my summit on osteoporosis. And she was saying, when they looked at a 3D image, they found the femoral neck, which is that area of the hip that fractures, the lateral cortex, actually increased in size, the diameter. So bone actually, it's changed the microarchitecture. It did so many amazing things. So this study really changed what we think, that yes, we need the resistance, so it's resistance training. When the muscle contracts against a resistance, it's pulling and tugging on that bone and saying, hey, we need more bone here. So it's strength training. You can be with weights, it can be with bands, the machines at the health club. So, but again, this wasn't, it wasn't like you do 500 reps or 50 reps. This was doing what's called 85% of one repetition max, but they did 5 reps. But in general, I always think like 8 to 10 reps. So it's the weight that was important, safely though, safely. So resistance training, and then impact. So these people lifted themselves a little and did a little jump. Not that that's for everybody, but that's what they found. The research has shown, even when people jump, they can increase bone density. So there are ways to do safely though. So my feeling is, you don't want to hurt yourself. Absolutely not. So I think if you work with a physical therapist, that would be my #1 choice. And ideally someone who's had some training. You can always go to what's called choosept.com if you live in America, and you can find, and you just put in either geriatric when they ask specialty, or women's health, and you can find, or you can call your insurance and just see where they cover and ask if they have experience with osteoporosis. But anyway, yes, so there's so many places, but it has to be safe, and it has to be a place that they are trained to know what to do. Unfortunately, there's a lot of gyms and a lot of places that they are not trained in really working with people with osteoporosis safely, like physical therapists and exercise physiologists. So
I know.
yeah, so
Yeah.
but I just want to say one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just want to say one more thing. But for the person that can't do that, no matter what, everybody can do balance exercises. So I love, one of my favorites is Tai Chi and Qigong. And if you're practicing your balance, because as we get older, if we don't use it, we lose it. If you're practicing your balance, and because most falls, our biggest problem is not what the bone density test shows. It's do we have a fracture? Can we live our life fracture free? And so if you practice your balance and you're mindful, which your app, all your stuff helps with, then you're going to be able to, you have that, and you won't fall. and you can prevent falls and fractures. So I think everybody can do balance exercises. There's something for everyone, and anything's better than nothing. And again, even if you maintain bone, that's still good. So lots of great things with exercise.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we actually just started a study for balance here with Dan Metcalf. He developed a product called 60 Up. It's not very expensive. It's like $400, and it's a balance board, but you can put it in front of your TV, and it has bars you hold on to. And actually, he got getting people out of wheelchairs, because once you get your balance back, and what we do is we have brain tap sessions that mirror, it's called SMR, the sensory motor rhythm. Those are the ones we were talking earlier about, your meditations, morning meditations. That's what you want to engage in the morning, because that's also the brainwave for balance. And what we find is that we can improve it by doing brain tap, but it even works better if you can get the body exercising, And then the other thing, that if people want to do a little research, Al Carter, who actually made rebounders popular, he worked with NASA, because when the astronauts go into space, one of the things that they lose is bone mass. And when they come back, they have to figure out how to get that bone mass back. So he found out that rebounders are really good. These are the little things you jump on. Now, I don't recommend the $30 ones you buy at the store. You got to buy a good one. But there are exercises, and they have things you hold on to. And we had one gentleman that only had one leg, but he would sit on it, and his grandkids would bounce on it. It still worked, because it's gravity working against the bones, like you said. So there's some ways to work that out if you really look at it. And I think it's so important that you do that. Now, we also say you can't think of bad diet. So I know there's nutrition you talk about. There's key nutrition for optimum bone health. Can you tell us a little bit, what kind of tips would you give somebody to maximize bone growth or keep maintaining their bone structure using nutrition?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because most doctors will tell people, calcium and vitamin D. So what I found is that people are getting calcium in their diet, plus then they're getting, calcium supplements. So I often find they may be even getting too much calcium, because you really only need around 1,000 milligrams of calcium total. But you said something very important before about like the sugar and all the anti-nutrients that, reduce your absorption of calcium, magnesium. So it's so important, like you said, you can't fuel your body with junk and expect it to have healthy bones, and you wouldn't put that in your car. So why do you put that to yourself? But in terms of calcium is very important. So I always tell people, use 1,000 milligrams, see what you're getting in your diet, calculate your calcium in your diet, subtract things that are high oxalate, because a lot of people don't realize, like they may look at a chart and they may see spinach is, there's like 200 milligrams of spinach, but spinach is very high oxalates, and the oxalates are compounds that bind with the calcium and make it indigestible. So you can't count that as, and there are several people who have issues, but that's a whole nother topic. But my point is, so calcium is important. Add up what you have in your food. Then I would subtract, the high oxalate foods, don't count them. And then you want at least, 1,000 milligrams. And certainly in the United States, they say around 1,200 if you're over 50, but you don't want more than that. So that's where I would supplement with calcium. And I like either calcium citrate or calcium hydroxyapatite, microcrystalline hydroxyapatite. Do not use calcium carbonate. That's sort of like the Tums and other things, which require stomach acid, which we don't want to give up our stomach acid. So those are, so that's calcium. The next thing is really, vitamin D. And vitamin D, most doctors check your levels, and it's called the hydroxy vitamin D, 25 hydroxy, and you'll see what your blood levels are. And then you can determine, for some people, if they're out in the sun or different times a year, you'll need less, but then your doctor can help you determine how much you need in terms of the vitamin D. And, a lot of people are deficient. And then the other one that's so important, this is the one that's missing, I really believe that's just critical, is vitamin K2. And there's two different types, but the K2 takes that calcium and puts it into the bones, make sure it gets there, and sweeps it out of the soft tissue. So you're not getting calcium in your joints, in your kidneys, other places that we don't want the calcium, in your arteries. So the K2 is really important. And there's an MK7 and MK4. Both are good. The research is more research on MK4 with preventing fractures. So, but I think both are good. I think if people are at high risk of fractures, then I do recommend the MK4. But anyway, and then magnesium. Magnesium is just something that a lot of us are missing, and it also is very important for your bone health. And I say at least if you're getting 1,000 calcium, at least half the amount of magnesium. Years ago, we had a 1-to-1 ratio, but at least 50%. And yeah, the magnesium helps relax, so they could do the magnesium with the brain tap, right?
And they can do magnesium before bed if they're having problems
Yes.
sleeping. That's one of the things that we find, if they do it before bed, it's one of the best ways to get it into the system, and you'll see your sleep scores improve because it relaxes the muscles, like you're saying, so, and then that helps with bone health. So we always talk about thoughts, traumas, and toxins, and we kind of covered a few of those, but now let's talk a little bit about thoughts and stress. Now, of course, there's physical stress, environmental stress, but we're talking about when somebody starts to feel unhappy or they're not feeling good. We call it the psychoimmunology feature of the brain. Basically, it creates our neurotransmitters. Really, it instructs our gut on what to do. Tell us a little bit about the role of stress reduction and how that can increase our happiness quotient and our bone health.
It's so interesting because the people I see are so worried. They're so worried. Am I doing the right exercise? Am I eating the right foods? Am I doing everything? But they don't realize I see a very high stress population. I think the world is just high stress, but they don't realize that stress increases cortisol, and cortisol is the stress hormone. And research has been done that cortisol increases the osteoclasts, which are the cells that break down bone, and cortisol reduces the osteoblasts, the bone building cells. So there's a direct correlation, just like when people are given steroids, that significantly reduces their bone density and their bone quality. So, but emotional stress will do the same thing, and people don't realize the big role that it plays, and this can be breaking down bone. So I think they've shown this both in animal models as well as the human models. They've shown people who have high social stress have reduced bone density. And even with happiness, people who are happier with their lives have increased bone density. So it all goes together. And to me, as I said earlier, the happiness and the reducing stress are part of your foundation, and that needs for every single person I work with. I incorporate this because I think you really can't get to, especially I don't find that people heal when they're in the sympathetic state, when you're in fight or flight. And I found this as a physical therapist, for over 40 years, people just don't heal in that state. You have to change, and you have to incorporate the rest and digest and absorbing your food. And so these practices are just so fundamental. And I've just seen this over and over again. Plus, what a better way to live, right?
Well, I know that you're actually offering anybody at Brain Tap Nation that listens to this podcast a free 7-day happiness journal. And we're going to have the link in the show notes. But tell us a little bit maybe about some of the things they're going to learn during that 7 days when they download that journal.
Oh, yes. So the thing is, what they found, the difference between people who are happier and people who aren't, is that people have certain habits, but they found that you can learn those habits. It doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum. You can increase your happiness. And I've been teaching this, for, as I said, 40 years. And I've seen that. It doesn't even matter. But some of there's different habits that I put in there because I think it's like a smorgasbord. You have to see what resonates with you. But one of the biggest things that is, it's how you view your day. Do you wake up and say, oh, this is going to be a great day, or look for the good? A lot of times people are so overwhelmed and they see what's not working, and what you focus on grows. So one of the tips there, so you can rewire your brain for more positivity, and just easy things to do is, you sort of become a detective for the good, like look for the good. What's here? You can ask yourself, what's here I cannot presently see, or what's the best thing that can happen today? And just start noticing good things research has been done on saving. So when something good happens, you savor it. Savor it for 20 seconds. If I tell you, this is a great podcast, or I love Brain Tap, and says, oh, it was nothing. Thank you. Absorb it, I
Yeah.
think, so
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm a big believer. Obviously, we're big believers in that at Brain Tap. We actually have a whole process that almost every session has it, where you basically use submodalities. You take the good and you make it bright and colorful. You put music in the background, you relive it. You put together a success reel that you review in your mind. And I had one of my mentors when I was first starting in business. He basically told me I was going to go broke because I didn't know what I was doing. And he was a very successful businessman. And he said, you need to look for the gold in every pan, is what he used to say. So anything that's handed to you, you need to look for the. So that's a good way to say it. So what have you seen? You actually offer a morning meditation where and we're going to get those on Brain Tap from you.
I'm so excited about this.
But tell me a little bit about what you're doing and maybe how people can participate now, because you're doing it right now, right? They can join you.
Yeah, oh yeah, the morning meditation. No, that's just it's a recording that's with the journal when they get, and I just put some of these things with music by Jim Oliver. It's an incredible music that actually also heightens your, it's a good vibration, the music. But what it does, it just sort of puts your mind in that, what, I'm going to look for the good. I'm going to focus on what's working. And so it just puts some of these habits into your mind so you can start your day start your day like that, because it's such a difference if you wake up and tell yourself as I said, what's the best thing that can happen, or just set yourself up for success versus, looking at your cell phone, focusing on your to-do list and on your worries. You're just going to get more of that. Not to throw the negative thoughts out the window. There's different techniques for that as well. But I think it just, and I've seen this. I mean, I know in myself too, if I don't do my practices, and one of the practices, that's the last practice in the book, is just journaling, writing in the morning, just journaling for even 15 minutes is really life-changing. And I explain how to do that in the journal. But there's just, whatever practices work for you. Because I'm actually a happy person. I'm
able to implement something.
Yeah. So when you think about helping someone, what have you seen? Like most people that you work with, is there a common theme you see when people are trying to overcome whatever their negative bias is that you help them with, or is it all over the board? Does there seem to be like something you see most often?
What I see with the people I work with osteoporosis is overwhelm and fear, focusing on, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall and have a fracture. And that's taking over. And so when you're thinking like that, you navigate so tense and so tight. And so you need to really feel strong. You need to change that fear into empowerment, because when you're empowered then, and you realize, what? Also, one of the big things I teach is to question the thoughts, sort of like the Byron Katie method, where, is this really true? Is this true? Is it absolutely 100% true? Because so often we live on these presumptions and we act accordingly, and it just ruins our lives. So when we can sort of question our thoughts, they lose their power. And then we can think about thoughts that we want to embrace and we want to live with. And so, yes, so I see when people go from fear to empowerment, everything changes. And I also think the biggest thing I see also is victims. People, there's like being a victor in life versus a victim. And the difference is, are you blaming, shaming, or complaining? And people oftentimes are like, oh, poor me, I have osteoporosis, or I have this, I can't do this, oh, poor me. And nobody gets better in the victim mindset. You just don't. It just keeps perpetuating. And the big thing is to change from focusing on the problem to the solution. Like, okay, you know what? I'm going to start doing strength training. I'm going to change what I eat to foods that are going to nourish my body. And I'm going to start doing some stress reduction practices. And I'm going to do Brain Tap. So, but when you do that and you focus on solutions, all of a sudden you're moving in direction. You're in action versus, for me, you're sort of, frozen and immobilized. So I would say those are the big things I see, that when we can make those switches, which are really not that difficult, then people can start taking inspired action. And that's when change really happens and everything gets better, and they become less stressed and happier. So it really is a win-win.
Yeah, I know they did a study during COVID that might be interesting for the listeners to research. They showed that when somebody took COVID as a challenge instead of a threat, the mitochondria actually transmitted 200 times more light energy, because we all are transmitting energy in the form of light. And when we're stressed, and what they equated that to was downregulating our genetics. So literally our body, if we took it as a threat, our genetics actually programmed us to be less effective than more effective. So when Henry Ford said, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. I mean, our genetics actually mirror that. So if they can start getting up every morning, like you said, during the journaling, focusing on the positive, they're actually upregulating their nervous system, which in turn will upregulate every system in the body, and they'll have a better performance. So when you think about this, can you tell us some stories, without telling us, of course, the people, but some things you've seen as far as turnarounds when somebody started using these principles and getting their bone happiness back so they could have a happy life?
Yeah, I think of one woman in particular, and she was just so miserable. Truly, she just felt sorry for herself every day, and her bone density wasn't good, and everything was falling apart, just everything. And she really didn't want to journal, and I found the people who are most resistant, not that everybody has to, it's not for everybody, but then she started getting things out. And what I could see, the thing that I've noticed as a physical therapist, is we feel muscles. And so you could feel when someone's tense, they can't fake it to a physical therapist. And so for her, what it was, a lot of it was the people around her. And she had this certain church group that tensed her up, that, and she would go there. So she had to change who she surrounded herself with, incorporate exercise, incorporate journaling. And so everything got better. Her bones eventually got better, improved, and all these other things she was having. She had massive stomach issues, and she was on all this medication. She was able to get off that, and then she started enjoying her life. She started doing things that were artistic, things that she didn't realize how important it was to do something that brings you joy and happiness. And so you just see everyone has their own creative genius, whatever it is, and you just see that developing when people are able, because if you're so focused on your physical symptoms, it's hard to start doing other things. But once you can, get things under control and start realizing that, yes, my stress and happiness. So that was one person. I've had numerous other people who, when they, again, you have to do all, there are people that have to figure out why are they so inflamed, so there are a lot of issues with gluten, and bone. I can't even tell you. So there are people that gave up gluten and their bone density increased, their arthritis they got rid of, as well as doing, as they said, I can't say what caused what, because I do all of these things with people. So it's a combination. But, then they realized you can go with the flow. I think that's the key. And that one woman I'm thinking of, she said, her son said to her, Mom, when I say these things to you, you usually fly off the handle. What's happened to you? She wasn't caring because she was just on a more even keel. Life's tough. We're not going to change the stresses in life. That's not possible. That's not our goal. But if we can work on ourselves and work on our own, ability to be resilient and our own happiness quotient, and then when things happen, we can adapt to it. We can go with the flow. The wave doesn't push us over. And that's what I've seen. And what I see in my community, because I have a whole community. I have a community of, people like membership, and I also just a happiness community. But when we get together, you just see big smiles and people just enjoying their life and being able, regardless of what's happening, as we said, it's not easy. They're able to get through it and handle these things just with, and handle them and move on and enjoying life while they are still dealing with sick parents or a sick spouse or their own issues. So yeah, so that's what I see. It's pretty miraculous. And I just feel grateful to be able to be a part of it. I'm sure as you do, because I'm sure you see this every single day, but and these things are fun. Who doesn't want to have less stress and be happier? So it's just, and that helps your health. Like, how great is that? Yeah.
Well, you've been lecturing for a long time to Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, hospitals, women's groups. I mean, this isn't the normal talk of a, of a physical therapist. So how did they take this when you give them this message? How are you being responded to out there?
Well, when I talk, there's so many different things I discuss. Sometimes I used to do, I mean, I still do ergonomics. So I always give them the physical things that they need to do. And then I tell them you cannot underplay this piece. And so I think people are very receptive. And I think people realize that their stress cases, they're not sleeping. They're not, they're miserable. They're not eating. They have stomach issues, whatever it is. So I think a lot of people realize, and I do tell them, I tell stories that I was always happy. I've always been a person in the glass half full. But my background, my mother was type A. I came to be, my actual tendency is to be very stressed. It's not relaxed. And so I tell them my story that I signed up for an 8-week mindfulness meditation program, got a speeding ticket on the way to meditation. Can you imagine that? And that hit me in the head and said that you are not practicing what you preach. So I went from being happy but stressed to making these practices the most important thing in my life, and saw so many changes. And so I think when people realize, they can start with easy things. They can start with breathing. They can start with, listening to Brain Tap. I mean, there's things they can do that are not hard. And once they see, and I just tell them, try it, try these things and see what happens. And once they see it, they realize they don't want to live the other way. So I think people have been very receptive because that's not the only thing I teach them. I teach them all these things they can do. And I say, and this piece you can't miss because this is the foundation. So yeah, so it's been very well received. No one's ever questioned that because I think deep inside they know stress isn't good.
That's great. I wish more people would talk about that because they think it's they can have that pill without any skills. When you teach the skills, you might find you don't need all that pill. So we're going to share all of your web pages. You're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. People can see videos. They can join your group. You have a website that we're going to put down below. They can join your 7-day healthy happiness habit journal, which I think is incredible. Thank you for that gift. But what if I forgot to ask you, or what do you want to reinforce to Brain Tap Nation about this concept of happy bones, happy life?
Well, I think don't minimize the bones, number one. Number two, I think always look at a diagnosis, or if you find something out, as an opportunity to find out what more can you do. And, there's always, I always find there's silver linings. There always is. And then sort of see when you investigate what you can do, whether it's your bones or whether you're feeling stressed, don't just accept it. And if the doctor says, and you don't like what the doctor says, just keep exploring. Because what I've found is that people then add all these good things to their life, and then they look back and it was a blessing, and so on. And you'll be empowered. So I just think, whatever you're facing, stop, say, okay, it's a little bit of a gift in a way. And what is it telling you? What information, and how can I act on it? And when you look at things like that and be empowered to find solutions, it's really just a better way to live life. So don't give up at all.
Well, thank you, Margie, and thanks for your 40 years of practice and being willing to share. A lot of people keep their happiness under guard because they think somebody can steal it, and you're sharing it with people and teaching them how to have that happiness. And that's really what we're about here. When we're bettering a billion brains, we want happy, healthy brains. We just don't want people to have a brain that is fearful and things of that nature. So you're doing a great job out there. I appreciate that. I'm going to encourage everybody to go learn more about Margie. We're going to have all of her notes below. Just like you've heard on other Brain Fitness podcasts, we're bringing you tips and tricks from experts that can help you. And your happiness quotient is one of the most important things for your brain health, because the more optimistic you can be, the happier you are. You don't have to worry about that thing called mental illness, because, I've never heard anybody say, Doc, I'm too happy. Give me a pill to reduce my happiness. This is something that you can, and when you're happy, you naturally share that happiness. And that's what we need more of in the world. We need more people smiling like you're smiling and sharing their joy and making this world a better place. So thank you for being a guest on the show. And we look forward to promoting this out to Brain Tap Nation.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's really been fun. It's always a pleasure. And thank you for all the work you do and what you create to help make people happier and reduce their stress. And I'm such a big fan. And I'm excited to do some stuff together. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we're gonna promote that. We'll probably have you on again when we get your sessions encoded on there. We'll talk about how to use them and get that back out to BrainTap Nation so they can hear you and start implementing that happiness strategy in their morning meditations with BrainTap. I think it's gonna be great. We're gonna encode those with SMR. For those that know, we want to wake up that brain, get the cortisol, the norepinephrine, and dopamine in the right amounts in the morning so that you can ride that cortisol trough into the afternoon with high energy and get things done. So I think that's great. So again, this is the Brain Fitness Podcast. Please share this with anyone you know, especially those that might have that fear. She was talking about the fear of falling, or maybe they're not feeling so happy right now because, my dad once said when he was alive, he said, getting old isn't for sissies, but I think we can do some things to ease that and make it better, because we're living in a culture now that says, hey, we don't want to age like my grandparents did, where you just sit in a chair and wait till you die. I mean, our lives are extending and we want to have healthy bones and have a happy life, like you're saying. So these happy bones and happy life scenario, I think, is a very powerful message to get out to the world. So please share this, like this, get this out to everyone you know that could benefit from it. And that's pretty much anybody. Like you said, you don't have to have a problem to have a breakthrough. So let's have a breakthrough before you have a breakdown. And the best way to not have these problems that people fear as they age is to prevent them by getting healthy and building strong bones early. Like you said, you have this bank account. So even if you have children, stress to them the importance of getting off their butts and sitting around playing on screens, and get them out running around, putting a little pressure on their bones. So again, thank you, Margie. We're going to get this out. And those of you at BrainTap Nation, I look forward to having you listen to our next Brain Fitness podcast. But until then, please help us to reach those billion brains by sharing this, liking it, getting it out to the world, and basically being kind to each other and building a world worth living in. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better a billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.